So in 2025, there's this company that essentially doesn't sell a single physical object. I mean, they have no storefronts, and they basically just beam invisible zeros and ones directly into your living room.
Right. Just pure digital delivery.
Exactly. And doing just that, they generated over $45 billion in pure cash. But then, and this is the crazy part, at the very end of the year, they decided to take $42 billion of it to buy one of the absolute oldest, heaviest, most traditional movie studios on Earth.
It's quite a plot twist.
It really is. So welcome to the Deep Dock. Our mission today is to look right under the hood of the biggest streaming engine in the world.
And to do that, we are cracking open a single incredibly dense source. Netflix's 2025 annual report, you'll also hear it called their Form 10K.
Yeah, the 10K.
Right, it's a massive document. But, it tells a really remarkable story about a business that has entirely changed its own DNA over the last few years.
Yeah, and for you, the listener, if you love gaining all this thorough knowledge without drowning in all that awful Wall Street jargon, we are going to decode exactly how they operate right now.
Exactly. Breaking down the actual mechanics of the business.
Right. We'll look at the products they actually sell today, their business model, and dissect the massive numbers behind their 2025 profitability. But so before we even get to the billions of dollars, we really have to understand what exactly you're buying when you pay them every month.
Because it's not what it used to be.
No, not at all. If you think you're just paying for, like, a place to stream television series and movies, the 2025 report makes it super clear that the core product has mutated into something much, much larger.
Yeah, the 10K explicitly highlights this massive structural expansion. I mean, they are moving aggressively away from just being a digital video library.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. The report emphasizes video games, live programming, and even a huge push into physical and digital consumer products. Plus, they mention these things they call live experiences.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're deliberately blurring the lines between, passive screen time and active real-world interaction.
I see. It's almost like Netflix is trying to transition from being your local movie theater to being like the entire entertainment mall.
That's a really good way to put it.
Like they want you walking through the digital doors to watch a sci-fi series, sticking around to play a mobile game based on that series, and then, buying tickets to a real-world immersive pop-up experience in your city that weekend.
Exactly. They want the entire life cycle of your entertainment.
But just out of sheer curiosity, looking at this massive modern entertainment mall, did they make a single dime sending out those little red DVD envelopes in the mail in 2025?
Not a cent.
Seriously.
Nothing. Zero. The report confirms the DVD by mail business was officially put in the ground back in 2023. It had absolutely no impact on their 2025 revenues.
End of an era, honestly.
It really is. But what's fascinating here is that their focus is now entirely on this global digital ecosystem. They state very clearly in the report that they don't just view other streaming services as their competition.
Who else are they competing with?
Well, they're competing against linear television, obviously, but also video games, social media scrolling, reading a book, basically anything else you choose to do for leisure.
Oh, right. Just general free time.
Exactly. And they have a very specific, almost philosophical phrase for this in the report. They call their core objective winning moments of truth.
Moments of truth. Wow. That sounds a little dramatic.
A bit, yeah.
But when you break it down, it's that exact second you sit on your couch, you realize you have exactly 45 minutes of free time before you have to go to sleep, and you grab your phone or your remote.
Yep. The decision moment.
Right. Who gets that sliver of your life? That's the moment of truth.
That is exactly the moment they are optimizing for. And trying to win that moment across the entire planet requires an incredibly complex infrastructure. I mean, as of the end of 2025, they have about 16,000 full-time employees globally.
That's a huge headcount.
It is. But what stands out in the report is how they manage that globe. They essentially divide the world into 4 massive regions. You've got UCAN, which is the U.S. and Canada.
Okay.
Then EMEA, covering Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. LATAM for Latin America, and APAC for the Asia-Pacific region.
And to serve those specific regions, they aren't just, taking Hollywood movies and dubbing them into Spanish or Korean. The 10K actually outlines a strategy of deep, localized content creation.
Very localized.
Right. So they have to build these massive production ecosystems in multiple countries to cater to regional tastes, while, I guess, hoping a few of those local shows accidentally become massive global hits that cross all those linguistic boundaries.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly capital-intensive way to operate. I mean, you have 68% of the workforce based in the US and Canada, but your actual growth, your audience, and your production sets are scattered across dozens of different countries.
Right, with totally different languages and cultural norms,
Exactly.
which I think brings up the biggest puzzle of this whole operation. So Netflix has built this colossal, localized entertainment machine to win our free time. But how do they actually squeeze billions of dollars out of our attention spans?
That is the big question.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get into their business model, because 2025 saw some structural shifts that, honestly, completely change how Wall Street evaluates them.
Definitely. I mean, the foundation of the business remains subscription-based, of course, but the pricing strategy has become hyper-fragmented globally.
Right.
Depending on where you live in those four global regions, a paid plan can range from the equivalent of just $1 a month, all the way up to $37 a month.
Wait, $1 a month? That is wild.
It really is a massive range.
It just shows they are treating emerging markets as a pure land grab. Like, just get the app on their phone at any cost.
Absolutely. Get the penetration first, worry about the margins later.
But, the biggest revelation in the 2025 report regarding their business model isn't even those pricing tiers. It's the fact that Netflix completely stopped reporting their membership numbers to the public.
Yeah, that was a huge shift.
They just won't tell investors how many subscribers they have anymore. They shifted their primary financial metrics entirely to revenue and operating margin. And honestly, when a company stops reporting its key growth metric, my immediate thought is that the engine is stalling.
That's a very common reaction.
Right. It feels like a company trying to hide the fact that they've run out of new humans on planet Earth to sell accounts to. Isn't that like a restaurant refusing to tell you how many people walked through the door and only telling you how much cash was in the register at the end of the night?
I mean, that was the immediate criticism from the market, for sure. In the early days of any tech platform or subscription service, absolute headcount is basically the only thing investors care about.
Right, because it proves the concept is actually viable.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is that Netflix is arguing they have reached a saturation point in their mature markets. So the sheer number of subscribers is no longer the most accurate gauge of their financial health.
Okay, let me try to put this in perspective. It's like a massive theme park deciding they don't care if daily attendance flatlines at 10,000 people.
Right.
If they just report 10,000 people every single year, Wall Street panics and says they've stopped growing. But behind the gates, the theme park has figured out how to get those exact same 10,000 people to upgrade to VIP line skip passes, buy $50 souvenir t-shirts, and, pay extra for premium parking.
Yes.
So the headcount didn't change, but the amount of money extracted per person basically doubled.
That is the exact dynamic playing out here. And they are doing it through a couple of specific levers. First, the introduction of the ad-supported tier.
Right, the cheaper plan.
Right. A user paying a heavily discounted monthly fee might actually generate more total revenue for Netflix than a standard premium subscriber.
Because of the advertising dollars being sold against their viewing hours.
Exactly. And second, they successfully implemented the crackdown on password sharing by introducing those paid extra member accounts.
Which range from what, like $2 to $9 a month?
Yep, depending on the market. So just counting a quote-unquote subscriber doesn't actually reflect the reality of the cash register anymore. Average revenue per user, or ARPU, is the true metric that matters now.
It shifts the focus entirely to efficiency. But to understand why that efficiency is so insanely powerful for them, we have to talk about the cost side of their business model. Specifically, the fixed cost nature of their content.
This is crucial.
I really think this is a concept that often gets lost in the shuffle of media reporting. Like, let's compare it to a traditional business. If I run a factory making laptops and I sell 100 laptops, I have to physically pay for the metal, the microchips, and the labor for 100 units.
Right.
But if I sell 1 million laptops, my costs absolutely explode because I have to physically build 1 million units. The costs scale directly with the sales. But Netflix's product doesn't work that way.
No, it is the absolute inverse of physical manufacturing.
How so?
Well, they pay billions of dollars up front for multi-year commitments to studios or to produce their own original series. They pay the writers, the actors, the directors, the crew. They lock in that exact cost before a single person ever clicks play.
And once that show is just sitting on their servers, it costs them the exact same amount of money to stream it to one person in Ohio as it does to stream it to 50 million people across the globe.
Exactly. Aside from some tiny fractions of a penny in server delivery costs, it's essentially free to scale.
It is a model of extreme upfront risk, but unprecedented scale on the back end.
Yeah, if a $200 million movie flops, well, the money is already gone.
Too late.
But if it becomes a global phenomenon, they reap all the financial benefits of that extra engagement without their production costs increasing by a single dollar.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. So we have a company prioritizing revenue per user over raw subscriber counts, operating this massive fixed-cost content model. The natural question is, when you put all those ingredients together in 2025, did the recipe actually work?
Oh, it worked.
Let's dive into the income statement. Let's look at the actual numbers.
The numbers for 2025 are just staggering. Total revenues hit $45.18 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, that is a 16% jump from the $39 billion they brought in during 2024.
And we just talked about the magic of that fixed cost model.
Yeah.
Because their biggest expense, which is making the shows, is mostly locked in. Almost every new dollar they generate from a price hike or a new ad slot or a paid extra member, it just falls straight down to the bottom line.
Exactly.
Once they cross the threshold of covering their baseline costs, the remainder is just pure profit.
You see that leverage really clearly in what we call their operating margin. And for the listener, your operating margin is just the percentage of revenue you actually keep as profit after paying for the day-to-day costs of running the business.
Right, like making the content, paying the staff, marketing, server costs, before you factor in taxes and interest.
Spot on. So in 2024, their operating margin was 26.7%. But in 2025, it expanded to 29.5%.
Wait, so they aren't just making more money, they're actually making money much more efficiently.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that efficiency drove their operating income up 28% to $13.33 billion.
28%.
Yes. And notice the gap there. Revenue only grew by 16%, but operating income grew by 28%.
Because they are scaling the cash coming in without having to scale their overhead at the same pace. I mean, the 10K notes that their marketing expenses only grew 13%, and general administrative costs grew just 11%.
It's incredible operating leverage.
But, okay, looking at the cost of revenues, which did go up 11% overall, I actually noticed two massive line items driving that increase. And one makes total sense, but the other one is incredibly strange.
I think I know which ones you mean. The first one is a $1.12 billion increase in content amortization.
Right, which we'll get into the mechanics of in a second. But essentially, as you produce more expensive shows and movies, the accounting cost of that library naturally increases. That's totally expected.
Right. But the strange one is the other $1.12 billion hit.
Yes. The report lists a $1.12 billion hit from, quote, non-income tax assessments in Brazil. What exactly is a non-income tax assessment, and how does it suddenly wipe out $1 billion of value?
Well, when you operate a digital business globally, you are subject to the tax laws of hundreds of different jurisdictions. And income tax is what you pay on the actual profit you make. But many countries utilize non-income taxes, which are levied on your gross revenue, your transactions, or the digital services themselves, regardless of whether you actually turned a profit in that specific country.
Oh, I see.
And Brazil has a highly complex, very aggressive tax code for foreign digital services. So Netflix was hit with a massive, localized assessment.
It really is the hidden friction of being a borderless digital empire. Like,
Right.
you can beam the signal anywhere, but eventually the local governments want their cut of the pipeline.
They absolutely do.
And the company stated they don't expect this specific Brazilian tax issue to materially impact future years. But honestly, swallowing $1 billion surprise penalty and still seeing your global net income jump 26% to nearly $11 billion, that really shows the raw power of the engine they've built.
It really does. But we have to be careful here.
Why is that?
Because a massive profit on an income statement is really just designed to make Wall Street happy. It is an accounting measurement. Any seasoned business owner knows that a profit on a spreadsheet does not always equal cold, hard cash in the bank. I mean, you can be highly profitable on paper and still go bankrupt if your cash is tied up in the wrong places.
Okay, so let's follow the actual cash. Where did the money actually come from in 2025? And more importantly, what did they do with it?
Well, if we look at their operating cash flow, which is the actual liquid cash generated by the day-to-day operations of selling subscriptions and ads, it was massive.
How massive?
They generated $10.15 billion in cash in 2025. That is a 38% increase from the previous year.
So what does this all mean? To understand how they generated so much cash, we really have to revisit that word you used earlier, amortization.
Yes, the ultimate Hollywood accounting concept.
Exactly. So they spend billions of actual dollars to make these movies, right?
Right.
But they don't take the hit on their profit and loss statement all at once. The 10K states that over 90% of a content asset's cost is expensed within 4 years on an accelerated basis.
Right. Let's translate that for the listener.
Yeah, think of it like deciding to do a massive luxury kitchen renovation. The contractor demands $100,000 in cash today. You write the check. The money leaves your bank account immediately.
It's gone.
But when you're doing your personal monthly budget tracking on a spreadsheet, you decide to only record a $25,000 expense this year, $25,000 next year, and so on. The actual cash is gone today, but the accounting pain is spread out over time.
That is precisely how content amortization works. And for years, this was the biggest criticism of Netflix. Pundits argued that their accounting profits were just an illusion because they were burning through billions of actual dollars to build their library faster than the cash was coming in.
Right, they're essentially debt financing thousands of massive home renovations all over the world.
Exactly. But 2025 proves that the dynamic has permanently flipped.
Really?
Yeah, their revenue has scaled so high that it easily covers those massive upfront cash payments for new shows, leaving them with over $10 billion in surplus cash.
Which leads us directly to the financing cash flows.
Yeah.
When a company suddenly finds itself sitting on $10 billion in extra cash, they have choices. They could hoard it in a bank account. They could build massive new physical studio lots. But their financing cash flows for 2025 were deeply negative. Negative $10.35 billion.
Right.
Where did it go? Well, the vast majority of it went into buying back their own stock.
Yeah.
We spent over $9.15 billion on stock repurchases in 2025 alone. That's up nearly $3 billion from the year before. But let's explain how this actually works for the listener. How does taking $9 billion in cash and buying your own company's stock actually help the business?
So, stock buybacks are essentially a tool for artificially engineering shareholder wealth. Imagine a company as a pie cut into 100 slices.
Yeah.
Each slice is a share of stock. If Netflix takes $9 billion of its own cash, goes onto the open market, and buys back 10 of those slices, they don't keep them in a vault. They effectively destroy them. They retire the share.
Oh, I see.
Now, the pie is only cut into 90 slices. Because the company is still generating the exact same amount of profit, each of those remaining 90 slices just became mathematically larger and more valuable.
So they have so much cash that they don't even know how else to deploy it internally to grow the business. So they are just returning the value directly to the shareholders by shrinking the supply of stock. I mean, that is the ultimate flex of a mature tech monopoly.
It really is a flex. And on top of that $9 billion in buybacks, they paid down $1.8 billion in debt that matured in 2025, and they issued zero new debt.
Wow, zero.
Yep. They ended the year with roughly $14.5 billion in total debt, which is incredibly manageable for a company of this size, especially since they're sitting on over $9 billion in cash and short-term investments.
So for you listening, let's summarize this incredible journey. They transitioned from mailing physical DVDs to building an intangible global entertainment mall. They pivoted from chasing raw subscriber growth to squeezing maximum revenue out of every user through ad tiers and extra member fees. They utilized a fixed-cost content model to generate a staggering $45 billion in revenue.
It's amazing.
And it all culminated in a 2025 that was basically a masterpiece of financial discipline. They paid down debt, they didn't borrow a single new dime, and they rewarded investors with massive stock buybacks. It is the picture of a perfectly tuned, highly controlled, modern digital cash register.
Which is exactly why the final piece of this 10K is so genuinely shocking.
What do you mean?
Because hidden all the way in the back of the report in a section labeled Subsequent Events and Commitments is a detail that completely upends the entire narrative of financial discipline we literally just walked through.
Oh, the ultimate plot twist.
It is. The report discloses that in late 2025, Netflix signed a definitive agreement to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery's streaming and studio businesses.
Wait, really?
Yes, this includes their historic film and television studios, HBO Max and HBO. The total enterprise value of this acquisition is an astronomical $82.7 billion.
$82 billion.
And to pull this off, Netflix has secured commitments for a $42.2 billion bridge loan.
Let's stop right there and clarify what a bridge loan actually is,
Right.
because it is definitely not a standard 30-year fixed mortgage.
Not at all. A bridge loan is exactly what it sounds like. It is short-term, usually very high-interest debt that a company takes on to, bridge the gap between a massive purchase and securing permanent financing down the road.
Right.
It is highly volatile, extremely expensive, and incredibly risky if the market turns against you before you can restructure it.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
Netflix spent the last 15 years actively disrupting, dismantling, and frankly bankrupting legacy media.
Yep.
They built a highly efficient, invisible digital pipeline that runs on zero physical infrastructure and spits out billions in free cash flow. They spent all of 2025 proving to Wall Street how absolutely disciplined they are by paying down their debt and buying back stock.
Right.
And then, at the very end of the year, they decided to take out $42 billion in risky, short-term debt to physically buy the Batmobile, the historic Warner Brothers water tower, and literally the oldest, heaviest, most traditional legacy studio hardware on the planet.
That is the reality of the deal. They are swallowing the very legacy system they were built to destroy. And I think it leaves us with a really profound question regarding their future.
What's that?
Well, if Netflix's current success relies entirely on being a tightly controlled, highly efficient machine, what happens when you bolt a debt-heavy 100-year-old traditional studio onto the side of it?
That is the billion-dollar question.
Exactly. Will this massive pivot break the financial discipline that made their 2025 numbers so spectacular? Or, is buying HBO and the Warner Archive the final ruthless step in establishing an untouchable global media monopoly?
It is the ultimate irony, and arguably the biggest gamble in entertainment history. They basically spent a decade proving that software eats the world, only to use the profits to buy the physical world back. Whether this new, massive, debt-fueled hybrid empire can actually maintain the pristine margins we saw in this 10K, or whether it totally collapses under its own weight, well, we are going to have to read the 2026 report to find out. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.